morning. Good to see you. All right. Good morning. Okay. Welcome. It is 9:02 or 9:01 a.m. I'd like to call this meeting of the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley Board to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. And let me just confirm who all is voting on the board today.
Madam Chair, Fernando Macias, I'm here representing officially Commissioner Sanchez.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then councilors and Commissioner Ellens. Okay, thank you. I would entertain any motion to approve the agenda or any changes.
Madam Chair, I move that today's agenda be approved.
Thank you.
Second.
It was moved by County Manager Macias and seconded by Councilor Flores. Could we please have a vote? Thank you.
Board Member Macias?
Yes.
Board Member Flores?
Yes.
I need you on the microphone. We're going to have to turn off your microphones if you're not using them. There we go.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Ellens?
Yes.
Board Member Gandara?
Yes.
Chairperson Coran?
Yes.
Thank you.
As a friendly reminder, only 3 out of all of us, I think, can have theirs on, including Becky and myself. So just as a friendly reminder. So, all right, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting on February 24th.
So moved. Second, Gandara.
Moved by Board Member Allen, seconded by Board Member Gandara.
Board Member Macias?
Yes.
Board Member Flores?
Yes.
Board Member Ellens?
Yes.
Board Member Gandara?
Yes.
Chair Coran?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now up to the reports and presentations. I see we have both city and county folks from animal control here, so I look forward to hearing from you all. Up first. Please, as a friendly reminder, please state your name for the record.
Hello, I'm Brian Holsey. I'm the caseworker for Donana County Animal Control. Let me pull this up really quick. For the month of February, we had 246 reported stray animals. We had, out of those 246, 153 stray animals that were picked up. Out of those 153 stray animals, we had 42 cats and 111 stray dogs. We also had 12 sick or injured animals. We had 1 cat and 11 dogs. We had 16 owner surrender animals, and they were all dogs. We had no cats this month. This is our 4-year comparison chart. Again, for this year, you'll see that it's not fully completed just because it's beginning of the year. That'll start to average out with the rest of the years. This is our 4-year field return to owner comparison chart as well. For our additional animals picked up, like again, I said there was no cats this for February. We had 16 dogs. We had 12 sick or injured animals. We had 2 for welfare hold. That could be from anything from a sheriff's deputy or something like that that arrested someone, then they had a cat or a dog or something like that in the vehicle. So that way we could hold them for them. We had 22 shelter quarantines. We had 0 home quarantines for the month of February. We had 4 court-hold quarantines. In our live evidence, we currently are holding 7 animals waiting their hearings to see what happens with the dogs. And for the month of February, we had no rabies submissions. This is our districts, District 1 through 7 for the board members if they need to know what they are. For District 1, we had 6 dogs and 0 cats. For District 2, we had 29 cats and 13 dogs, which was pretty lower compared to the January numbers that we were discussing last month. For District 3, we had 9 cats and 25 dogs. District 4, 2 cats and 27 dogs. District 5, 2 cats and 19 dogs. District 6, we only had 4 dogs. And District 17, we had 17 dogs. This is our stray cats that we picked up for the year up to date. This is our stray dogs. And then our owner surrender animals, the reasons that we had one aggressive. The dog was starting to act aggressive towards people or other animals, but not to the point where it was being vicious, actively attacking or anything like that. We had 1 vicious animal. We had 3 where the dogs were unable to be taken care of. We had 3 for livestock attacks or killings, 1 for health issues. The dog was just, if I remember correctly, the dog was just getting old in age and couldn't keep up with its health. We had 5 for a elderly woman that was moving out of state and going into respite care out of state. And we had 2 where the owners were just unable to keep the dogs on the property. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Officer Halsey. Board Member Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. So I have questions about what you do with animals that are aggressive, vicious, health issues, and owners unable to keep restrained on property. I mean, those have become, as you know, that's a very big issue right now. So what does the center do?
The center, Donana County.
Oh, these are county?
Yes, these are all the counties.
Well,
these are the owner releases for the county.
Okay, they've released the ownership, and then where does the county take them?
So we have a contract with the shelter that we take them to the Animal Service Center in Mesilla Valley. If it's something that we have to deal with in-house, if we get a warrant or something like that, then we hold them in our facility, which we currently have 7, waiting for petitions for dangerous and or vicious.
And you say warrants, so is that a warrant issued by whom?
By us.
Oh. And so ultimately, what happens generally then, if you don't have anything specific?
So if we have animals in our court hold facility waiting for our petitions for whatever reason, it's usually for dangerous and or vicious animals. We wait until the courts have to deem the dogs to be dangerous and or vicious, and then they decide if their dogs are going to be euthanized, if they go back to their owners, whatever the outcome may be. But the judge decides that, not us.
And for those dogs, I'm presuming they're dogs in most cases. Well, the animals, I'll just say animals. The aggressive, vicious, and unable to keep restrained on property, those are decided by a judge. Is that correct then?
So for the owner releases that we have on the current screen, all these dogs were sent to the Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley.
And then, well, Clint is, maybe Mr. Thacker. I'm just trying to figure out how potential animals that are potentially very dangerous to human life are being handled, and what the outcomes are. once there is an identified dog and it's in the process of being delivered to the shelter and going to court, yada, yada. Thank you.
Clint Thacker, Executive Director, Animal Service Center in Cedar Valley. It all depends. It's all on case by case is how it's done. So if the animal has already bitten, shown extreme signs of violence, we look at the conditions of the case, then if it warrants, we euthanize it. If it's an issue where we can't replicate it, like they say the animal is very aggressive towards men, and we have men kennel workers, the dog wags its tail, we have our kennel supervisor might go in the kennel with it, it's submissive, it's happy, then if we can't replicate the issue and we feel safe that it can be done, then it'll be put in the adoption program or put out to the rescue program. So it's all about replicating the issue that's there and showing that, yes, that is the problem, and then using the tools that we have. So rescue, adoption, euthanasia, all those things that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker, and thank you very much, Chris. Thank you.
Board Member Ward?
Just to kind of go into a little bit more detail, so when an animal control officer picks up a dog on a warrant, when they first go on a case, they, depending on the elements of the case and what they can provide support for that, those elements, they've got to have support for their evidence, supporting evidence. So they go out there if the animal is, they suspect to be deemed vicious and or dangerous, and they have probable cause for that officer themselves. They have their witnesses, they have everything that they think can progress for that case. Then they will come back to the office, they'll discuss it with myself. This is Officer Brian Holsey. He's our caseworker. He's the one who handles and prepares the cases for the officers in regards to our petitions and our warrants, because the officers, have to go back out into the field, but he assists with that. So then he prepares them for that service. Once we do that, we look at those elements, we prepare that, we get the case ready, and then we obtain a warrant if needed. That warrant itself goes through the district attorney's office. Once it's approved through the district attorney's office, then it's proceeded through the magistrate court. Then it's gone through there, approved through magistrate court. Then that warrant is gone through and is served. The animal is seized. The animals come to our facility awaiting a court trial. A petition is also filed at that same time, because in a state statute you have 10 days once an animal is in your facility, in your custody, to file that petition awaiting that trial. So that's always done at the same time as well. Then once the animal is in our facility, we're waiting that trial. The outcome of that case, depending on whatever the outcome of that court is. Sometimes we can hold on to that dog for a long time. Sometimes the courts will fast track it. It depends on the judge itself. These owner releases that Brian is talking about, sometimes the people will just call us and say, I want to owner release my dog because he's aggressive. Well, what happened? Well, he's been too aggressive. He's been nipping at me. He's been nipping at my son. He's been showing aggressive signs. He went after the neighbor. He went after another dog. He's showing aggressive signs. Those are things that we put on that information sheet for the shelter, and we provide that data for the shelter. Then they sign that animal over to the Animal Services Center. At that point, that dog becomes property of the shelter. The shelter then becomes the new owner of that dog, and they can do what they deem necessary with that dog. But we provided that information for that shelter at that time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Ms. Ward. But I also, so if a owner relinquishes ownership, then the center becomes the owner?
Correct.
And then does the center have the authority to euthanize the animal?
Yes, and sometimes the owner will actually request a euthanasia upon an owner release. depending on the circumstances.
Great. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Board Member Flores, Clint Thacker again for the record. The question you just asked is twofold. If the person surrenders the animal to the county, then the county is the owner until it comes to us. If they come to us and surrender it to us, to the center, then we're the owner of it. The county has every right to say, we don't want, this animal is our possession. If it's on their owner surrender form, they have every right to say, I want this animal euthanized by, this is our animal. We choose to do that. And I've had these discussions with Gino and with Mary Lou that if that's the route they want to go, then that's the route that they go. They have their own owner surrender forms.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thacker.
Any more questions from the board? Oh, Councilor Gandara, and if I can just really quickly, if you all, you're welcome here, so I understand that you guys have your signs, but I feel like you're blocking the exit a little bit, so if you wouldn't mind coming down to sit down, you can sit right here if you want to have your signs, but I don't want you to be caught up in blocking the exit, so thank you. All right, Councilor Gandara, thank you.
Thank you, Board Chair Karan. Democracy in action, right? Love it. Okay. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I have a few more questions around the definitions of home quarantine and shelter quarantine, and what are those deciding factors, and how long does quarantine last?
Okay, so a home quarantine by definition is if the dog, let's say, bit someone on their property, it has to be on their property for the county, and the dog is up to date on its vaccinations, its rabies and everything, and they could prove it at that time. We do a home quarantine as long as the dog is able to stay confined on its property, away from other animals and people. Obviously, the people have to be somewhat around it because they have to feed it and water it and everything. But if they are able to do all those prerequisites, it stays on home at the quarantine, and the quarantine lasts for 10 days. So the first day of the bite does not consider to be the first full day. So it's actually like an 11-day process.
Day zero,
Yeah,
I guess.
correct. And then a animal service quarantine, animal service center quarantine is the same thing, except we take it to the animal service center, Mesilla Valley, and they quarantine it for the quarantine process, and they have people check it and everything.
Now, do you have dogs specifically, and what is the difference between your Courthole quarantine?
So a Courthole quarantine is the same thing as the Animal Service Center quarantine. We would take it to our Courthole facility, our live evidence facility, and we have caretakers there that will check them for their daily for the quarantine process.
So is there a difference between why you would select Courthole quarantine versus the center?
So the owners, since dogs are considered property, they have the right to choose where they would like to take it. So they could go to a veterinarian of their choice as long as the veterinarian is willing to hold the dog for quarantine, the Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley, or our Courthole.
Okay.
And so they get to choose whether they want to take it to any places, and then we answer the questions the best we can for them and let them make an educated decision.
So in your home quarantine, they would have to be tied up and not being allowed to roam freely in the property, or what is that? What helps you make that determination?
It
And I
depends on
realize
how
that's a
they're-
judgment call of yours, I
Correct.
suppose.
It depends on how they have their property set up. So a lot of people have kennels, things like that, that has enough room for the dog to move around in, and they can stay in there. Or if they have a property, I've had people that have properties that have multiple fence lines to the property, and they could keep it separated in one part, and it could run loose in that area.
Okay.
As long as it stays confined in that area. During the quarantine process, an officer goes and checks 3 times throughout that process to make sure the dog is still on the property. It's not showing any signs of rabies, anything like that.
Okay.
If we do find out that the dog is not being confined and it's running loose, or we get reports of the dog running loose, At that time, we could either obtain a warrant to seize the dog for the current or for the rest of the quarantine, or they could just say, hey, it's not staying on the property. I'd like to take it to Animal Service Center or a vet or wherever.
Now, those cases specifically, do they go to court and go in front of a judge to determine what to do next with the animal? Or what is that process like in terms of where it moves to determining to euthanize the animal?
It depends on, like he was saying, it depends on case by case. So if the dog was on its property, we've had people that, that were playing with each other, roughhousing, and then the dog took it as their owner being attacked, and they went and bit the person, something like that. So, I mean, it just depends on the case of the dog itself. And if we, as an officer, believe that it's something that's more dangerous, or the dog has a pattern or anything like that, then we can proceed to petition the dog to be dangerous and or vicious and go that route.
Okay, and it goes to MAC court, and that's where the hearing is being held.
Correct.
Okay. How do you inform the public that this is going on, or do you?
That would be between our public relations. The officer themselves don't talk to anything like that. That goes through public relations.
No, I mean for the court cases. Like, say, for example, next week you have a court case on one of your quarantine animals, right? That you petitioned the court as a vicious and moving towards, I guess, euthanasia. How do you notify the public about those cases in the event that people would want to hear, right? Those cases or have been a product of a bite or the viciousness, if you will.
Right. Again, as an officer ourselves, we do not go through that process. Again, that would be through our county and their communications.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair Coran.
Thank you, Councilor Gunn. And I have to say that I once underwent a home quarantine as a result of a foster cat that bit me, and then it got infected. So just to give you a path of, when I went to the urgent care, I actually had to report the cat, and so I went through that home quarantine, and it was, for me, a really great experience to see how much effort the officers put into making sure that animal isn't an ongoing threat and that the people are healthy. So I really appreciate the work that animal control officers do in that setting. Board Member Ward, please.
To elaborate on a couple of those questions, going into the home quarantine real quick, and like Brian was saying, in regards to that, as long as people have everything in place, they have to be current on vaccines, the animal was not running off the property, they can comply with the state regulations in regards to a home quarantine, so the animal is not interacting with other animals. They're totally separated for the 10 days that is required by the state for the quarantine period. That is the only way that will allow them to do a home quarantine. Those are the process, and usually those are cases where those are animals that are current on their rabies. There's usually people that own their own dogs, or maybe there was a birthday party or something, and maybe little Joey went and got bit by a dog or something, and those people can comply. So those are where you're going to see most of those home quarantines. Even if a dog's running loose and he's current on his vaccines, those animals do go into a quarantine process somewhere else because they've been running at large. But those are those home quarantines that you'll see. In regards to the animals quarantined at the Courthole facility, the Courthole facility will house animals for bite quarantines. The only animals we're not housing right now is stray animals, because we're not allowing the public to come in to view those animals, and we're still under construction in regards to our floors and things like that, where we're not equipped to house a lot of animals at this point in time. Once that is complete, then of course I think we can progress and look at things a little differently. But at this point, that's not at the area we are for the public to come in and view and say, oh, this is my dog. everything would have to be put online, and not all the public has access to the online. So if we picked up a bite dog, say somebody was running down the road and they got bit by a stray, and the officer was able to apprehend that stray, and we didn't have an owner for that animal, well, the best thing yet is for us to find that owner of that animal. Ideally, it goes to the shelter, because the shelter's open access to the public. The public can come in and view and look for that animal, and that's where they can come in and claim ownership. Once they do claim ownership right now of that animal then can be moved from the shelter, from that quarantine, into our facility to free up space from the shelter and for the remainder of that quarantine process. But currently, it starts off at the shelter. Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we are on that. And so on cases where, into the public, like notice of publicity, where there's big cases and whatnot like that. We don't readily give out information on, if I'm not sure if you're asking if we give information out on cases itself.
Just the case, the notification that there's going to be a public hearing, if you will, on that specific case.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, if there's information on a case itself, there is information that public information gone out. So information for the dog owners, any type of witnesses, anything like that within subpoena, so there's a due process, and if that's what you're asking about?
No, to the public.
Okay. You're talking about to the surrounding area, if there's a hearing. Yeah. Okay, so no, we're not sending out notice to the area we're going out to that area in regards to a hearing for that case. The only notice that we're sending out is if we have had like an increase of cases within that vicinity, then we'll send out a notice like, hey, that we've had an increase of X amount of vicious animals in this area or whatnot, but not an actual, hey, this person is going to court. We haven't sent out a notice like that. If that's what you're asking?
I am, yes, Mary Lou.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gandara, Board Member Gandara. I think that's it from the board members. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Gino Jimenez. I'm the Animal Control Supervisor for the City of Las Cruces. Now, if I could. So what I will present to you is the numbers for February 2022. So animal control officers responded to 444 calls of strays for February. 216 of them were GOA, meaning that the officer did not have contact with that animal. Of those, 240 were apprehended. 177 were impounded at the Animal Service Center. 107 of them were dogs, 70 were cats. We were successful in field RTOing 51. Those were dogs that had some sort of identification, and they were able to go back to the owner without crossing the threshold of the Animal Service Center. We were unsuccessful in field RTOing 14, and those were 14 animals that had some sort of identification. However, as we'll see in my next few slides, the reasons why those were unsuccessful. So we had a total of 66 total identifiable animals. Here is our 3-year comparison for stray calls. As you can see, we're keeping right in line with 2020, 21, and then so far this year. A really good average right there. Here is our 3-year field RTO comparison. Last month was a good month for us as far as field RTOs. We had a total of, like I said earlier, 51, which surpassed by 20 the previous years for this month, for the month of February, I should say. And here is our community cat slide. We were dispatched to 55 cats in trap calls. Of those, 3 were already identified as community cats. So those cats were released in the area where they were initially impounded. So again, like I said last month, Community Cats is a new program. So we're going to see a lot of calls initially of cats in traps before we see that number start catching up to the community cat number. Here are the reasons for owners releasing their animals. 9, the owner was unable to care for them. And these were all separate owners. They were not the same owner. 6 were for dogs being aggressive towards people or other animals. 2 actually killed another dog, and 1 bit the owner's sister. 4, the sister moved and left those behind. 3, the dogs were sick or injured, and 1 was a euthanasia request. 2, the dog owner passed away, and the son could not take the 2 dogs that his father had. 1, the dog is always escaping. 1, the dog owner was moving to a new apartment, and the landlord would not allow him to keep that dog there on his property. Another one was where the dog barks too much. And finally, the dog owner was moving, and he could not take it with him. And to emphasize what the previous slides, the reasons that we were unsuccessful in field RTOing, 6, the chips were not registered, and 8, there was no contact by phone or at the residence, and 1 chip was actually registered in Colorado. So I think that last month we talked about it, how important it is for citizens to update their microchip information so that these animals will get returned back to the owner quickly. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions from the board? Board Member Flores, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Jimenez, or Officer Jimenez. So on page 3 or 4, 3, yeah. Or maybe it was page 2. Can you go to page 2, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it says 444 reported stray animals for February 2022. And then, so the numbers that are subsequent, that follow there, it's 216 GOA, 240. Mm-hmm. That doesn't add, right there, it's over 444, so.
So let me see if I can, Madam.
So how does that really break down?
Madam Chair, Board Member Flores, so if you add these numbers up, this, our field RTO,
Okay.
51, our impounds of 177, you will get our total of 240. So I have the cheat sheet in my office.
Well, I wish I had it too.
And I double checked it. So.
Thank you for not sharing. Okay, so I think what I'm trying to understand is, well, first of all, what kinds of animals are reported as, quote, stray, unquote? Does it include a myriad of animals that we find, especially on the maybe District 3, where, it's closer to the open land and maybe coyotes out there and all sorts of little critters? So is it just a domesticated animals, and would that include other animals other than dogs and cats?
Madam Chair, Board Member Flores, ma'am, this includes cats and dogs only.
Oh, cats and dogs only. Okay.
For this presentation, that is only domestic animals, cats and dogs.
Okay. And so there's a higher number of apprehended animals than gone on arrival, according to this chart, right? I mean.
Madam Chair, Board Member Flores, no, ma'am. If you look at the chart, we had a total of 240 that were apprehended.
Yeah.
And 116. Is that what you were saying? 116 were GOA.
Those are gone on arrival.
Gone on arrival, yes, ma'am. Is that?
So
What
I'm
your
saying
question
that
was?
you've apprehended more animals than, you've apprehended, more have been apprehended than those that weren't there anymore.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's my point. So, or trying to, no, there's no point. I just want to clarify that in my head. So then the 100 and, what's the distinction between the or why is there a difference between, you have 240 stray animals apprehended, but then you only have 177 impounded. And so is the breakdown, does the 177, 51, and 14 add up to 240?
Madam Chair, Board Member Flores, yes, ma'am, that's what I was trying to say. My cheat sheet, I have my cheat sheet at the office, but if you look at the totals and you kind of add them from the bottom up, it should equal the 240. So you have 177 that actually went into the Animal Service Center. The officers were successful in 51, so you add those up together. I don't have a calculator up here with me. And then the 14 were already included in the strays that were impounded. So you have,
Well, it's a más o menos type of,
it's accurate, and I wish I would have brought that cheat sheet with me, and then
Yeah.
I could explain it a little bit more. But the numbers are accurate now.
oh,
I will send you an email with that cheat sheet,
no.
so that we get
Okay.
a better understanding.
I
of it.
think what I'm trying to, what I think I want to stress by asking some of these questions or highlight is that almost half of the stray animals reported are gone on arrival. So that apprehending them is definitely out of your control.
Madam Chair, Board Member Flores, absolutely. And if you look at my numbers from previous months or even previous years, you will see that that's a consistent number. It's almost more than 50% are GOA than they are apprehended.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that go into factor with that. Time, officers on duty, when was the call called in? Let's say, for example, a stray was called in at 10:30 p.m. I don't have officers on duty at 10:30 p.m., and it's going to pend until the following morning. 6 hours later, more than likely, that dog is not going to be there. So it's going to be GOA in the morning when the officer does respond. But let's look at a different scenario where the officer, I have 2 officers on duty. We take care of other priority calls, maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes pass till that officer can get to that call. Again, that animal is not going to sit there and wait for us to show up before it takes off. A lot of things go to factor.
Yeah. Definition of stray.
Definition of stray, yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mr. Officer Jimenez. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Board Member Macias.
Thank you. I'm beginning to kind of see some of the reports I've already suggested to Mary Lou about modifying some of the county reports so that it isn't so initially confusing, because I understand why Councilor Flores is having some difficulty. You're indicating that we're 444 reported stray animals. 216 of those you couldn't apprehend because they were no longer visible to the officer to be able to apprehend. But you're saying that you apprehended 240. If you add those two numbers together, that's 456, or 12 more than the 444. I think that's initially confusing a little bit, but again, it's just 12 off. But then you go to 177 strays impounded. So you have to assume, because I know that you're saying go from the bottom up, but nobody does that. Everybody goes from the top down. So out of 177 strays impounded, you assume that that's out of the 240 that were apprehended. So 51 of those are successful field returns, but I'm assuming that's not of the 177, which is the number above. It's 51 out of the 240 that were originally apprehended. And then it has 14 unsuccessful attempted field returns. Okay, so if it was unsuccessful, they were impounded, so that for the 51 is part of the 240. I'm assuming the 14 is out of the 177 because they were impounded as well. So it is a little bit confusing in terms of, because the bottom line is how many actually got into the shelter, how many of them were dealt with then later, were owners coming in to recover apprehended dogs. That would be an interesting statistic to be able to look at, because then when you look at the total, the bottom line, it says a total of 66 identifiable stray animals. So does that mean that out of the 240 that were originally apprehended, 66 of them, the owner came in to recover the animal?
Madam Chair, Board Member Macias, and taking into consideration everything you just said, sir, absolutely. So the 50, these are the numbers that were requested by board members in the past, and we've added and updated these slides as time has gone by. Sometimes it gets a little bit confusing, and we do our best. But one thing I just noticed that when you pointed it out, so we have 51 successful field RTOs. Those numbers are not included in any of the strays or any of the impounds because obviously they didn't cross the threshold of the Animal Service Center. Those numbers were requested by previous board members to, so we knew how many we were actually giving back to the owner. But one thing that you did point out right now, that number of total identifiable animals should be 65, not 66. So that makes a difference of 1. But if we would like to change the format of this slide so that, flip it the other way so that we're adding from top down, and you get your total, your sum at the bottom, I'm more than willing to do that so that it makes more sense.
Madam Chair, the only point I was trying to make is in order just to follow the report easily without having to do, and I do it respectfully, and I always feel uncomfortable having to kind of cross-examine someone in order to get a better understanding in terms of the numbers. I would just encourage that the reports be looked at in a way that it kind of flows. So I think you started it out right with 444, although that number from my count should be 456, because those are the total stray animals that animal control officers have had contact with during the course of that month. And so then when you go from month to month, it becomes more difficult to follow the trends. Mm-hmm. So you see the year-long trends and you see basically a line, but it's not clear to me that that follows an appropriate explanation if you're going from month to month. And that's really the only point I want to make. I don't want to belabor this any further, but I do want to make sure that we're able to have a quick understanding of the statistics that we're being shown. And if they're being shown on one page, they ought to correlate with one another all the way down. That's the only point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Board Member Macias. Sergeant Mitala.
Lieutenant Joy Huitala for the record. County Manager Macias and councilors and board members, just for an explanation in reference to those two numbers not adding up. So we take the 444 from our actual RMS, our record management system, as far as reported strays. So that can come in, and that's where we're generating that number from. The other numbers that include the stray animals apprehended comes from our actual ACO officers. So in that case, you might see an increase. In other words, it's going to be potentially a little bit more than that reported stray animals, because there's times where they'll actually see a stray themselves. So in other words, it wasn't reported. It didn't get a call into our central dispatch, but the animal control officer is out driving, and they're driving in the city streets, and then they see there's a stray animal there. I'm going to pull over. I'm going to self-initiate a call and get the stray that way. Does that make sense?
It does, but somewhere before the report is prepared, that ought to be correlated, because then you have the basically policymakers that are taking a look at these statistics in order to try to follow trends, and they're not adding up, and all they're doing is provoking additional questions. Yes.
And I can understand that, and we can better articulate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. Okay. Other questions from the board? Board member Macias, I'm guessing you're good, yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board member Gandara, please.
Thank you, Chair Curran. Thank you, Gino, for the presentation. My questions are similar that I asked the county. Do you remember them? No.
Partially.
It's more of educating myself as it relates to quarantine, a home quarantine, a quarantine that happens at the center, sort of your process from the city's perspective.
So, Madam Chair, Board Member Gandara, our procedure or policy is very, very similar to Mary Lou's, because that is set by state statute. So the only difference would be that they have their own court hold or quarantine facility, as where we utilize the Animal Service Center. But I believe that Mary Lou and Officer Housley had a very good explanation. If you would like for me to expand a little bit more on it?
Yeah, that would be great.
What would you like to know?
Well, let's say, give an example of a dog that has bitten an individual. Run that case or that scenario through your processes and laws and whatnot, statutes, if you will.
Absolutely. So let's just say Mary Lou used the scenario earlier of little Johnny getting bit at her birthday party. So let's use that scenario. The dog is currently vaccinated. The bite occurred on that owner's property, so that dog can be home quarantined. The process is exactly the same. The owner will sign an agreement stating that that they are responsible for the dog while it is on their property and under quarantine. It is a 3-step process: first day, 5th day, 10th day, where the officer will actually go out and inspect. What the officer is looking for at the initial inspection is to make sure that that dog cannot escape from the property. If for any reason he or she believes it can, then a home quarantine will not be approved. Then it will be up to the owner at that time to decide whether they want that dog to be quarantined at any other facility or at the Animal Service Center. That is their choice. From that point, we will take, not custody, but we will escort that dog to that facility if it's a vet. If it's going to be quarantined at the Animal Service Center, then of course that animal is put in our units and it's taken to the Animal Service Center, and all that paperwork is processed according to their policy. So the backside of that scenario, same scenario, if the property does meet all the requirements, then the owner will sign a form basically stating that they are responsible for the animal while it is under quarantine. If it is lost, stolen, escapes, anything like that, they will give us a call or dies. They will give us a call immediately, so that, number one, we can patrol the area looking for that bite dog. Number two, if it was stolen, then we will assist them in filling out a police report. And number three, if it dies and it's still there on the property, then we follow the proper channels and perform a necropsy on that animal. Because if it dies within that 10 days, the most important thing is human life. So we've got to get that animal tested for rabies as quickly as possible, and that test will come back so that we can notify the victim whether that dog was positive for rabies or not. Go ahead.
Sorry, Gino. So when do you seek a warrant, and do the cases go to MAG court as well for you?
Madam Chair, Board Member Gandara, we do not seek a warrant until we are actually trying to deem a dog dangerous or potentially dangerous, or if a bite dog has a known owner and they are either interfering with us taking that dog into quarantine or refusing to allow us to take that dog into quarantine, then we will seek a warrant from a municipal judge,
Okay.
and then we will execute that warrant.
Lieutenant Joy Wheeler again for the record. Just some clarification, a warrant is for a person. And so when it comes to any kind of like criminal cases, we seek a warrant, and that would be for a person. In reference to any kind of dangerous dog, it would have to be a motion for an order to seize that animal, because the dog is not a person, it is an animal. So we can call it a warrant, but technically it's not a warrant in the legal capacity. So in situations where it's going to be a potentially dangerous or dangerous dog, where we do have bodily injury to an individual, or worst case scenario, we have like a fatality, yes, we are going to seek out a potential motion of an order to seize. And for us, it is a little different when it comes to what court we're going to, because we respond to our municipality.
Yes.
And so we have a city ordinance. And so for us, we are going to respond to the municipal courts. And we are going to do a motion through the municipal courts. And through the municipal courts, we are going to ask the judge if there is enough, again, facts to determine that this dog is in fact a dangerous or potentially dangerous dog. And then part of the process is that when we do anticipate that, we are taking ownership of that dog. Not the shelter. We might house it at the shelter. But again, some differences in different policies. And it's not to say that one is, it's just different than the other.
That's
so
fine.
For us, when we have that and when we're investigating, we will take ownership of that dog with the understanding that the pet owner is agreeing to take ownership. So ultimately it's the owner, but let's say that they're saying, you know what, I feel that the dog is aggressive as well. They will sign over ownership to us, and that's where then we can follow through with the actions that we need to take and potentially going through the court process.
Lieutenant Whittler, do you have that 10-day period
Yes.
of gathering all the facts, the evidence, if you will, and putting it in a petition?
So the 10-day is really all about making sure that the dog doesn't show signs of rabies or anything like that.
Right.
That's where like the whole 10-day comes from. That's where I know, Counselor, you mentioned your cat. That's why we want to obviously make sure that we're prioritizing a person's health. And so that's where, first and foremost, we're going to make sure that that is part of it. But as far as gathering the facts, gathering the information, seeking out the investigation, it might take more than 10 days. It might end up taking 15. It just depends on the amount of information we need to gather and the evidence that we need to gather.
So you don't have timeframes, is what you're telling me, as it relates
Not-
to submitting a court case?
Again, when it comes to the actual court case, or similar to any kind of criminal court case, we have to be actively working it and making sure that we're doing our due diligence to actively work it. But if it's going to take longer than 10 days, it might take longer than 10 days.
Okay, that's important to me. And then if it goes to court, and so you file the court case, how is the public made aware that this is happening?
So very similar to what our county counterparts were saying. An officer is not going to release that information to the public. That's why we have public information officers. And so everything would be released through our public information officer.
If you're asked, it just isn't like a given.
So again, for us, we will obviously keep, in this kind of a circumstance, if there's a pet owner involved, we're going to keep the pet owner involved. If there's victims involved, we're keeping them involved and updated as well. However, when it comes to the general public, we have to treat it like any other criminal investigation. And so in reference to any other criminal investigation, we're going to have our PIO officers release any information to the public.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Cran.
Thank you, Board Member Gandara. Are there other questions? Thank you, Lieutenant Huitala. And
I do have one more question. When you go out and you respond to these calls of a stray animal, what is the time frame? What kind of time does it take?
I know. and I might refer to my ACO supervisor because he has definitely been doing this job a lot longer than I have. But from my experience, since I've overseen the animal control officers, it's all dependent. We can have some days where when we're getting our calls for service, maybe there's not a lot of calls. And so when the stray calls in, that animal control officer is instantly able to respond to it. We can have other days where we have a good 10 calls for animal control officers. And again, it comes down to prioritizing what calls they're going to be going to first. An animal stray call where all we have is the detail of a black dog running down the street and that's it, versus a potential vicious animal in this neighborhood. Obviously, the vicious animal is going to take priority over the stray animal call. A bite where we've already have a potential victim, that's obviously going to take priority over a stray animal call. It really depends on, again, what's happening that day and the call volume that day. And I would refer to Supervisor Jimenez if you had any additional information.
Madam Chair, Board Member Gallagher, the simple question to that, the simple answer I should say, our response time to strays right now is 17 minutes. That is our average response time. Could that number be greatly higher, especially during the weekends? Absolutely, because on the weekends, I only have one officer working the morning shift and one officer working the evening shift. We don't have districts such as what maybe codes would have, how they have council districts and also beat districts. Animal control could be, let's say, in off of Union, and then they get a stray call in District 6 off of Morningside. So he or she has to travel that distance from one side of town to the other. Obviously, we all know with traffic, the way the city's exploding here in the past few years, that may take 20, 30 minutes for them to respond to that stray call. But our average response time at this for last month was 17 minutes.
I appreciate that, Gino.
And also to take into consideration, I only have 6 officers on duty. So they're running throughout
Now,
the city.
have you filled your vacancies, Gino?
It closed Monday, and we start the whole process starting today.
So what is your total number of officers no? What are the total number of officers on your animal?
Right now I have 6 with 2 vacancies, so a total
Okay,
of 8
Okay.
on staff.
Okay. And so I really my question, I appreciate the response time, but how much time generally does it take, right, for you to respond to a stray animal and then figure out who does it belong to? Because there's all these steps, right, that you take in order to ensure that that animal gets to the proper owner. You have to check if it's chipped, right, and then you have to go in and call or use your laptop to figure out where this animal belongs. I mean, it generally takes a lot of time, I'm assuming.
Madam Chair, Board Member Ganda, absolutely. So let's just say the officer does pick up that stray. Now, after they scan it for a microchip and all that information, we're looking at an extended, that doesn't take long. That would say 2 minutes at the most. But let's say that animal is chipped. Now we're adding 10, 15 minutes, if not more, of that officer taking that chipped animal back to its proper owner. So a stray call could be extended, take an entire time of 30, 45 minutes if there's a known owner.
Sure. So, and then how many calls are you getting after hours related to stray animals?
Madam Chair, Board Member Gandara, I don't know that number right off the top of my head. Most citizens of Las Cruces know that after 10 o'clock, it's only on-call basis, emergency services only. I would have to research that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right, because it depends, it would be interesting to know, okay, how many after-hours calls do you receive, but you only have one officer, or you don't have any officer. I mean, looking at it, we should probably look at that, I would think, and if we need to have an officer on call to respond to those, right, to reduce the number of strays that are out there, right, in the public, if you will. So just trying to get a real global understanding of what you're having to deal with, the type of calls, how you're responding, do you have vacancies, do you have the number of FTEs, those things. And then lastly, I mean, I know the public who's listening in here, you know, I've had an onslaught of emails about certain things. One very big case that I know that you're investigating, but also of other cases, right, where people have been mauled and had to have stitches. And I'm asking these questions because people are asking me, like, well, how do we know when those court cases come? We never hear that from the public, and I'm trying to educate myself and get the answers to those questions. Plus, I want the public to know that you work really hard, that you're responding to 400 plus calls, and those even that don't come into, right, the call center, if you will. And so it's important that I get educated, that we all get educated, but that we're also providing education to the public, because I think that's really important as well. And then I am concerned because of the number of emails that I've received, that I'm wondering if we're having more issues with bites. And I wonder if we can do kind of a GIS study and see if that is true and sort of what breeds are. And I'm not one to say we want to get rid of breeds. That's not what I'm saying here. But I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with the number of emails and calls that I'm receiving about dogs biting, vicious, right? Can't walk our dogs or ourselves in the neighborhood because we have, you know, these issues with animals. And I mean, they're just coming in droves. I don't know of the other counselors, but I'm thinking we probably need to do some investigating, maybe have some conversations, a town hall specific, right, to this issue, work with some of our advocates here in town and try to come up with some you know, strategies, right, to address this moving forward.
Madam Chair, Board Member Gandara, and I have to agree with you entirely, ma'am, because when COVID first hit, we were using, we had a tremendous amount of bites. It just skyrocketed. And we attributed that to COVID because as people were staying home with their pets were used to them going to work at 8 and then coming home at 5, and now they're here all day. Yeah. And you're bothering me, so they would bite out.
You're in my space, you're in my territory, yes. Yeah.
What are you doing here? Go to work. So we saw a tremendous amount of owner-victim bites. And the same was 19 and 20. The owner-victim bites stayed about the same as you can. I don't do that report, but I keep those numbers. 19 and 20 were the same. 21 kind of plateaued, and then it started to take a downward trend. But over that same amount of time, all of our bites, whether it's a stray bite or an owner-victim bite or an other bite, have all skyrocketed. We were using COVID as our first explanation. I can't use that explanation anymore. I have no idea why bites are increasing the way they are now. I can't explain it.
Yeah, no, I maybe it's still, we're still in that phase, right, the endemic, and people are still working from home. I'm not, I know of a lot of individuals, but I just feel like we shouldn't stand idle. We should probably try to understand this and come up with some strategies. And there have been some great suggestions from council on Monday related to that, maybe getting our animal protection group out here to really help examine some of this with us and the public. And I know that I want, more of a media campaign being thought of and really so that the public, I know that we have a lot of irresponsible pet owners, and maybe that's some of the issue. We just need to continue to educate ourselves on this matter. And so I'll let it go. I don't want to belabor it, but I am concerned, and I thought it a good opportunity to ask those questions, and I appreciate you, Gino, very much.
Madam Chair, Board Member Gondara, I appreciate your questions too because they were needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Curran.
Thank you, Board Member Gandara. Board Member Macias, and then I think Board Member Flores both had, or maybe just Board Member Macias had.
Do you want to
Okay.
go ahead? Okay. I just wanted to follow up with what Councilor Gandara was addressing. In any given month, if you look at the statistics, it's 444 animals that were reported. So out of that, 217 were not apprehended. So I think it's always a good thing to look at the positive, which is that over 50% of the animals or the strays were picked up. But that is a notable number. And so if the average time response is 17 minutes, that means in all likelihood there was an animal to actually seize. The longer that you stretch it out, 20, 30, an hour before you respond, well, you're not finding an animal. They're not there anymore. And it has that ripple effect all the way down to talking about violence because you have more animals out there on the street and potentially then with a potential to victimize either other animals or individuals. So part of the secret, and Mr. Thacker won't want to hear this, we have to be picking up more animals. But of course, do we have the capacity to handle that kind of increase at the Animal Services Center? And then as you increase the numbers, where are our adoption rates? How aggressive are we in terms of maybe shipping out animals to other areas of the country for adoption? So it has really a ripple effect. And historically, and I'm not trying here to advocate in any certain way, but certainly animal control has always been a lesser priority to, say, law enforcement or fire in terms of commitment of resources and commitments of personnel. But actually, I think a 17-minute, if that's the average, it's a pretty good response time. But again, the later it takes is why over 40% of the calls, you're not finding an animal to pick up. And can I just say, and not to harp on it, and these are little things, an arrest warrant is to seize a person. A search warrant is to seize property. So yes, warrants are for both purposes, and actually that discussion is making me want to go back and kind of take a look at what our process and how we refer to warrants and what their purposes are, and I'm going to do that before our next meeting.
Thank you, Judge.
Madam Chair? Go ahead.
Go ahead, please. Please.
If I can
Jimenez.
add a comment to Commissioner Macias' comment.
City manager,
County manager.
board member.
Board member, Macias, I apologize, sir. So about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to do a presentation in Albuquerque for blood sports. And after the presentation, I had an opportunity to sit down with their director and talk about trends in Albuquerque and what was happening in Las Cruces. One of the things that he told me that they were doing is animal control no longer responds to stray animal calls in Albuquerque. If they only respond to animals in custodies, because they realized that 50% of their calls were coming back empty, or there was no resolution, no animal to catch. So they said, why are we spinning our wheels? Let's just stop doing that. I didn't agree with him at the time. I said, because how can you possibly in good conscience say, it was gone, let's just let it go. But what if that dog was to bite somebody, 10, 15 minutes later? So a lot of discussion on that topic, sir.
And Madam Chair, just as a last note, and forgive me, I will, as a last note on that matter, it takes our animal control officers even more time out in the field trying to search for that animal because they're not readily identifiable. They're nowhere in the area. So they're driving blocks and blocks and blocks around the neighborhood just to make sure that, again, they don't get called back a second time when someone else sees the animal. And that takes a lot of time. And if there isn't an end product, there's been a lot of time out there in the field that hasn't been as productive as it could have been. So that may be a policy issue that this board should perhaps address in the future.
Board Member Ward, please.
Just a couple things. I wanted to go back into the vicious dog. When we talked earlier about the holding people accountable for vicious dogs and charging. Another thing we didn't say is when we do hold these people accountable, a lot of times, depending on the severity of the dog attack and what happens, at that point, we also get the Sheriff's Department involved because you could possibly be looking at potential felony charges depending on what has occurred. And I'm sure the city is probably looking at that at the same token, depending on what the elements are there on the crime. So that sometimes has occurred with the county with lately on a lot of our cases lately, as you could see, we've had one with a while back with a child that went over to the Sheriff's Department in regards to those charges. So those are something that can come to play as well. You know, we can respond, the officer will respond, and we partner with the Sheriff's Department in regards to that. And then I wanted to clarify in regards to the 10-day on the petition, 10 days, we file the petition at the same time we pick up the dog. We hold the dog for 10 days, but the petition has to be filed within the first 14 days once we get the dog into our custody, according to the state statute. Another thing that me and Gino had talked about, and you were wanting to know what to do about these vicious dogs or these dog attacks, we've kind of been discussing this because we've noticed our numbers and their numbers have gone up. We talked about developing a task force in regards to the Dangerous Dog Act and the city and the county and putting our resources together and looking at, you know, maybe meeting and discussing like what are you seeing, what are we seeing, what is the nation seeing, what is the state seeing, what are the numbers and what can we do, and how can we help each other in regards to handling these cases, because we have seen an increase as well. And we know something's up, we don't know what. And I agree with Gino, we've had a lot of COVID, I call them COVID puppies, where people have adopted animals during COVID. Now they've gone back to work and the animals haven't been socialized like they should be because of, you know, things were closed down when they got these animals. And so these animals don't know how to act or whatever the case is. But they're not just animal bites. They're a lot of them vicious attacks, but we're not sure why we're seeing an increase in that. But it's not just, I've been looking, I've been reading, it's not just here, it's globally. So there's a lot of increase globally. So we're looking at that, and so I just talked to Gino about this, and so we're looking at something like that.
Thank you. And I really appreciate your inputs, and thank you, Officer Jimenez. The title thing is really hard for me. I'm sorry, I'm always calling people the wrong thing. Mr. Counselor, Board Member, Officer, Sergeant, Lieutenant. It's not my wheelhouse, I apologize. But thank you for your, thank you for your inputs. Are there any other questions from the board? And I just want to say, I think part of the reason that I think we're all thinking about this are very proximate issues related to dog attacks, but I think we're also thinking about all of the pies that we have to think about, human resource pies, budgetary pies, sort of community sort of resource commitments, and doing the best practices and thinking upstream as much as we can, because really we have too many dogs, period. We have too few responsible owners for those dogs, period. And so we have to think about where we can interrupt that at every level. And I'm hoping that we can think really critically in our upcoming budget conversation about where we invest in that and what that means and what the implications are for both the ACOs and the ASCMV. I know that they're big in both cases. So thank you for giving that insight, and I think that we really appreciate your looking at the trends and sharing with us what you see. So
You're welcome.
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Next up, Director Thacker, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Clint Thacker, Executive Director of the Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley. If you could humor me for a moment, and could we have the cameras go to the back of the area here? Because I just want the people that showed up, and I want them to be seen. They're not seen by anybody that's watching this on television and things, so I would like them, if they could hold their signs up, they could be seen and see why they're here. I think it's very important.
You guys can come up here, because I'm not sure if we can
If they come
turn
up
the camera
behind you,
around. I don't
Clint,
know how that works.
That's the only way the
That sounds
camera will
complicated.
catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way the camera will catch them, so they should come up here right behind you.
And Madam Chair, I'm sure this is going to happen, and it's one thing to obviously show, but I'm hoping that Mr. Thacker will address this concern as part of the report, since they've been waiting here, for that.
I think so.
And I'm sure he's planning to do it, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that rather than going through a lot of statistics necessarily right now at the beginning, that we might want to address the concerns that are being voiced here today.
If we'd like to, we could move public input up to right now, and we can discuss that. I don't have a problem at all.
You guys were briefly on I don't know how the cameras work at all, among many other things. You were briefly, there you go.
There we go.
And so there is a conversation about the hours related to being open at the shelter, and I do want to show that the community showed up today to articulate this and put it in the public record. And we do have public comments, which would come after all of these reports, so it would be a little bit, but if you'd like, we can also do an immediate public comment right after this particular report, so that you all can share as well. So thank you for coming. Thank you for caring. I know that you are here because you care about the animals at the shelter, animals in our community, and so I really appreciate and I want you to feel seen. So thank you.
And Madam Chair, my encouragement is that we've received emails. We know what the issue is. I'm just hoping that Mr. Thacker will take the initiative and address it.
Thank you.
Even before public input.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Thacker, you all can, if you would like to sit down and stick around, you'll have the opportunity as well to speak. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Mr. Thacker.
I just want to echo and say thank you for them coming. It's their time that they're here, their sacrifice, they made the time to do the signs, and I know they were outside. I just wanted them to be seen, and because I know what they're doing is out of passion and out of wanting the best for the animals, and that's why I'm here too, is want the best for the animals, and that's why we're all on this together. So there may be some disagreements about how we go about doing things, but overall, we're all here for the same reason. So I do appreciate that. So the director's report for this is March, but it is for the February numbers. Just to review this really quickly, 415 is the total count at the ASCMV, 359 dogs, and 56 cats. Our intake, 2022, we had 597 February come in. And look at that in 2021, 289 dogs. Wouldn't that be great? I'm all for the ACOs to report only to in custody animals. I mean, regardless, it's the same number of animals coming to us because what comes in, but it does make sense for that. Here's our transfer numbers. This transfers are rescues or places we've sent our animals to. Dogs and cats are on this list, and so are others. So again, Action Program for Animals is a big help to us because they take a lot of our ones that would not be in the adoption program, sick, injured, ringworm, those types of animals. So we appreciate them very much. Colorado Puppy Rescue continues to be a big partner for us for our puppies. Those numbers can add up really quickly. So with a mom that has, 7 puppies, you do that twice and you're already halfway there. So we appreciate all that they do. Enchanted Pass, 17 cats, that's a big one as well. And the Mile High Meows, Mutts, and Rescue Group, 14. We're always looking out for new rescues that are coming through. And again, we appreciate all, especially the local rescues that they're doing. Even taking 1 or 2 helps out, so we appreciate that. Here's our returns for February.
Commissioner Ellens?
Clint, Halo is a new rescue, is it not?
No, that is not. That's one we've been with for about 2 years now.
Okay, can you describe it to me?
They're based in Phoenix, Arizona, and that's what they do is they take animals from shelters and then they sell them at their facility.
Okay, I just didn't recognize the name. Thank you.
So this is February returns, not January, and it's the animal health issues. You can see the numbers there, 7 total dogs, and cats we had 2. Again, whenever somebody comes and says that they need to surrender an animal, we always go over why. We need to get that out. It's not just because I don't want it. It's, well, why don't you want it? So not only can we get better numbers from that, we can also offer the Rough to Ready program with our Doña Ana County Humane Society, that they come out and they offer free behavior, come out to your home, and we can, as the animal, because it goes in the bathroom all the time. All right, well, they'll come out and show you some tips on how to properly house train your animal. Won't walk on a leash. These are all valid things that have come up before. Dog goes after the cat. Well, let's get that Rough to Ready program going. We also offer some food for individuals, or we can give them the food bank information, especially the APA runs where they can get some food. So as you can see, even though we offer those, we had 9 people come forward and say we still don't want this animal. Here's our outcomes. Adoptions were at 24%, reclaims at 10%, rescued is 38.5%, community cats was at 19%. Of our outcomes, euthanasia was 18.6%, and our live release rate, which means animals that left the Animal Service Center alive, was 83.2%. Here's our euthanasia reasons. Behavior is the #1 reason for dogs, so behavior aggressive. What that means is aggressive at the kennel, outside the kennel, all around aggressiveness. It's not just one. The medical respiratory is our #1 reason for cats, and #2 for dogs. That the TX means that they've had treatment and didn't improve after the treatment. And then the next one would be the medical parvo. I know we had some puppies come in with parvo, so again, those puppies, they test positive for it, and we don't have resources for it at the time, so we would need to euthanize for the parvo. Our volunteer program is thriving. We have 674 hours for the month of February. 59 for our dog team, 16 in our cat team, with current active is 228 current volunteers. So they were a great help, our programs that we did during the month of February. Total visitors at the center, it's really evened out to the 830 mark, and that seems to be pretty much the average of what's going on. Here's our appointments for February. We had 167 of the appointments made. 95% of those were kept. And then 66%, 110 were finalized adoptions. So 66% of the appointments kept were finalized. Here's our walk-ins. We had 101 walk-ins, and that resulted in 27 adoptions. In other words, 27%. So 27% of the people coming in ended in a finalized adoption. I shouldn't say people, I should say groups. Like if, husband, wife, a mom and a child, that's a group. So. Website views, average there, 35,800. Down just a little bit, it looks like. And our Facebook views since November has really leveled out the 2,573. We hope to see a spike in next month's report, or I should say this month's report, next month. That's for our drive-through clinic. That was a huge success. And here are our pets of the week, Simba and Ava. Simba's a male, Ava is, a male, and Ava is a female. So I'll answer any questions.
Board Member Ward, did you have a question?
I just have a quick question in regards to the animals that were euthanized for aggression. If you can go back to that chart, Clint. In comparison, in regards to our questions about the aggressive animals and what we've been dealing with, is there any way to get the 2020 and then 21 numbers for statistical reasons on what we're looking at when we work on this task force, so we can have that for comparison as well?
Yes, just let me know when you would like it, and I'll get that to you.
Okay. And Mr. Macias had to leave, so he asked me to vote in his place. Thank you.
Thank you. And just going back to this aggressive question, I do want to clarify, that's your assessment. That's separate from any assessment that an animal control officer would do for an animal in that situation.
Everything's taken in consideration. And so like if an animal control officer states this animal is aggressive, it did this and this, well, a lot of times animals act totally different when they're faced with a pole coming at them, or some type of capture device, or uniform even, anything like that. And so we always try to mimic that same behavior. So if the officer says it was very aggressive while on the catch pole, that's something we might try. We might move it from one place to another. We might approach the cage rapidly. We try to mimic that behavior to see what about it is aggressive. So yeah, all those things are taken in consideration.
And they aren't all animals that came in for that's not this.
Yep, correct.
It's a population of animals that are just sort of that you have.
Yeah.
And okay, so just to clarify in terms of those, when we think about that, it might be a different set of dogs that are showing those tendencies.
Correct. It may
and there
came
might
in
be
just fine, no notes on the account, and it keeps attacking its kennel mate. And that's something we'll have to, and we look at that and take that in consideration too. So good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Other question? Commissioner Ellens, please.
Clint, you've got 228 active volunteers. How does that compare to other periods in time?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it's a lot more. We went through a period where we did not have a volunteer coordinator, and then we did have one. She was on for a little bit, and the program was just getting off its feet. And then now we have one that really knows what she's doing and has connections all over the city. So the 228 is a great number, and they're there. You've seen the pictures. If you've seen on Facebook, on Instagram, our pictures of our drive-through clinic we completed last week. It was phenomenal, the number of volunteers that were there. So we appreciate them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Gandara, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Clint, for your presentation. Just to follow up with Board Member Macias's comment and hopes that you would share your thoughts about the hours and why, and as it relates to the center's opening up fully. If you would share that and kind of why we've landed in this particular spot, please.
Well, and we did one last month that I felt explained where the ASCMV was coming from. And there was still a desire, even though we moved our hours forward, still a desire to have that expanded, the visiting hours. Whereas last month, we had no physical connection. By physical, I mean an actual connection for the public to walk through any areas of the center that were not employee-only places to get to the other animals, because the center is laid out completely different than it was in 2019 due to the construction that we're having. So the end of the month is when we're supposed to, and we're going to have a presentation about that, about our new facility, but our parking lot area is supposed to be given back to us at the end of the month. So we're hoping that's the case. If they can get it paved and everything completed, then we will have a pedestrian gate where we can actually access around the building. And I apologize for not having a slide or anything ready. I was out camping with the family from Monday until yesterday, and I did not know there was going to be, nobody alerted me until Wednesday afternoon. I received an email from staff that, I don't know if a protest or a standing was going to be here today, so I'd be better prepared. But so our thought is possibly we could have public go through, it's right by my office, that pedestrian gate, stay on the sidewalk and come around, because that area will no longer be a construction area. And you understand, they are very, very strict about OSHA rules and people not wearing protective equipment when it comes through a construction area, regardless if the construction is nowhere near where you're at. And that was my thought, is maybe we could access that, go around, and they could access 2 kennels. You also have to remember that even before the pandemic, the ASCMV was never open to the entire center for individuals to walk through. Never. It had the S kennels where they're walk through now, and then the kennel behind that. That was the extent where people could walk without being walked around by another staff member. Well, the kennel behind them are all stray animals. They just came in. So we can't have them in that area because they're not ASCMV dogs yet. In order to access the other kennels that are on the other side of the Animal Service Center would require them to walk through employee-only areas. Areas where vet techs are with dogs, where dogs might be in kennels, in the manager's office. I mean, all these things that I don't want regular people to have to walk through. And also cause disturbances. So once the end of the month we're looking at, we can extend those hours and have access to the rest of the animals. That was the plan.
Thank you, Clint. Also, you have a slide, I think, related to, the number of adoptions that have occurred and where they go? The source of that adoption? Yeah.
The source. Oh, where they came from? Is it this one?
Well, is it to rescues? Is it the public? How many actual adoptions year to year that come from the public coming and viewing the animals?
I don't.
And if you don't have it, we should probably start having it, because I think in reports year to year, we get more people viewing the animals but never adopting them. And I think that percentage is very important for us to know and the public to know.
It is, and that's a big frustration that my staff has, is when I talk to my coworkers about this, they say, I have to stop what I'm doing, and then I walk people through, and they say, thank you very much, and they're gone. And they said, why can't we stick with appointments where people know what animal they want, so I'm not wasting my time? And the response that I give them is that the public wants the walkthroughs, so let's look and see what we can do to mitigate or come halfway between ASCMV staff and the public. And that was the point of extending the hours and getting them out. This is no longer a COVID issue. I want people to realize this. I only said COVID when we talked about the very beginning when things were shut down. This is now just an access, a control environment issue is what we're looking at. There's also issues that our medical director cites for pro appointments is the amount of noise in a kennel that comes up is just phenomenal. And those animals that are shy or are timid, it's intimidating. There's also the factor of people putting their fingers in. I don't care how many signs you put up or how many people are there, people still put their fingers in the kennels. And it's okay once, but once you do it twice, whatever that first one has is now spread to the other one. And that's for dogs and cats. So, and also another issue is this is dogs only. I haven't heard any complaints of the cats because we have our adoptable cats right there at the lobby and they're seen.
Thank you, Clint. I appreciate that. But if you could get that slide together, I think it's important to have that with the year-to-year comparison. It is an important number for me anyway. And if you could do that, I think it's important.
So you would like, just for clarification, you want a year-to-year slide showing the percentage of people adopting, whether they come into the center on their own or made an appointment?
Not just people, but rescues, those animals that you send right to, which you have. I think it's important to have it in one place to look at. It's not just people coming in and viewing and adopting, but also these animals that you get shipped out, right, that get adopted. I think I want to see it in one place.
So the one on the screen is not the place you want to see that? Because from what you're saying is you want to see what percentage of our animals or how they're leaving the center, it sounds like. So we have the outcome slide on the screen now that shows what percentage of those animals left in February and how they left.
Show me again. Which slide is that?
Oh, I thought you guys could see
Is
my
it
slide.
6?
Let's see. This one.
Yes, but it doesn't tell me what the source of the adoption is, or
Okay. So you want it broke down of what
Yes,
type of adoptions?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Coran.
Thank you for letting me clarify that.
Thank you. Councillor Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Board Member Gandara. What I first understood Board Member Gandara to say, and maybe she didn't mean, but what I understood was that she'd like a breakdown as to how many adoptions, how many viewings result in adoptions. And that, I think, would be really good insofar as to see how, how much the viewing, how much of the viewing really contributes to adoptions. And if there's a direct correlation in the number going up, then I think that having that kind of data, Clint or Mr. Thacker, and the other data that Board Member Gandara was pointing out in terms of, because you did say that it takes your personnel, it takes time from their duties to give a tour. Really, it's really a tour, and they have to be controlled for the reasons that you stated. It isn't a playground. It isn't a place. It isn't a dog park. It's a place where animals are being protected and taken care of. So, but I think that by keeping those stats, it might be helpful to really push the envelope, really push the issue, force the issue to hire more personnel, because I think that is an issue at the Animal Service Center. I might be wrong. I think there are some vacancies, so I think those stats would help, Clint.
Okay.
Thank you. And it'd be good for us to see, for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flores. I think I just want to address a couple things that I've heard, and we do also give the public a chance to sort of give their feedback, but this is sort of the summary of what I've heard. And so I think that these statistics are important, but there's also as much as we can do possibly to sort of think about this as a place we can come to the middle and work together to make sure. I think some of the issues that I've heard are things like the animals that are being seen are a subset that may be curated so that limits the number of animals that are, so for instance, certain size dogs versus other size dogs. And so small dogs are always popular. So then I think that those percentage, I agree the percentages are important, but I think part of what folks are here to sort of talk about is thinking about how to broaden people's access to all the animals in person. And so I do think that that sort of critique is understandable. And I think moving forward, Assistant City Manager Enriquez and I were just having a conversation today, and I think we're hoping that we can also lend, if we could possibly lend some city resources to shift, because part of this is GO-bond construction, parking lots being out of order, where can staff be, or staff transition from parking related issues. So I think if we can lend any resources, and I'll defer to ACM Enriquez, to sort of some of the things that you mentioned this morning and just now, to help support that goal of increasing access to in-person viewing, and understanding that it may ultimately land in a place that's a combination of these things. I think we all know that things have changed, and the way we do things have changed, and having a new shelter means another variable that we can't rely on the data that we have necessarily to understand that. So, and I defer to ACM Enriquez, and then I'd be curious to hear if anything might help.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, all, and Madam Chair, thank you. Yes, if access is one of the issues, and with the construction, I'd like to sit down with Mr. Thacker and see what the scheduling is for his staff, and then also get with the project managers and see what we can do as far as access or alternative parking, maybe even some shuttling. We have transit available, and maybe it can shuttle some of employees. But again, getting with Mr. Thacker and seeing what their schedule looks like for their staffing, and how we can accommodate that so that the public can have access to the facility. So we can work on some of those things.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Owens, please.
Clint, hiring more people is always problematic. Could you not use volunteers to escort these tour groups?
We currently are asking for volunteers to be on a schedule. They come and they sit and have sign people in when they do the walkthroughs of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They are notoriously unreliable just because it's their time. I mean, when they may sign up for it, but if something comes up, we're one of the first ones to get cut because they have something more important. Most Saturdays and Sundays, there is not a volunteer there to help sign up. So that would be we are going to ask volunteers when we start the new parking lot opens up, so we can have people walk through. I don't have any problem at all having volunteers walk staff through, or walk people through, but I'm not going to rely on them as far as the schedule is, because it is hit and miss type of thing.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioner Owens. Any other questions from the board? Now, I do think we would normally keep moving, because I think we have a couple other committee reports and an action item. I'm sort of looking to the board to provide me guidance here, and should we, I have a feeling that we should move through these things to make sure that we go through our action item to get to public input, because I'm worried that that the action item might be delayed if we have public input right now. With the consent of the folks here, I do think that the next few items will be pretty brief, I suspect, except for go ahead, Councilor.
Are you suggesting that we change the order of the agenda
I'm suggesting that we stick to the order of the agenda.
so that we can get to our action item?
And then have public input after it, because I know he had just mentioned that we might have public input right now.
No, I agree with you. I
Okay.
think we should stick to our agenda and move on.
Okay, but I do want to make sure that we do have robust public input and the folks who are here have a chance to talk. so.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Director Thacker. I think next up we have committee reports. I would appreciate the Finance Committee up first.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Josh Saffel, and on behalf of the Finance Department of the City of Las Cruces, I would like to present the unaudited financial statements as of February 2022. Starting off, looking at our statement of net position, we see in the general fund cash of $1,390,256, receivables of $308,455, for total assets of $1,698,711. We have liabilities of $56,471, revenue collected in advance of $197,008, and this leaves us with an unassigned fund balance of $1,445,232. Looking at our change in net position, we see for the period total revenues of $2,552,546 and total expenditures of $1,934,434. So this left a net change of $618,112. Of that, we see that the total revenue of $2.5 million was 66.4% of budget, and total expenditure was 50.3%. Our budget parameter is 66.7, so we see that the revenue is just about right in line, but our expenditures are under that. Looking at the breakdown of revenues and expenditures throughout the months, we see this is one of the few months where our expenditures have gone slightly above revenue for the period. Looking at our expenditures, the total, of course, was $1,934,434. Of that, by type, salary was 49% of those expenditures. Benefits was 16%. Services was 18%. Supplies was 8%. Temporary services was 5%. Insurance was 2%. Capital was 1%. And other was 1% as well of the total expenditures. And that will conclude my presentation. I stand for any questions.
Thank you for re-upping Ava and Simba. Any questions for the board?
I have a question. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mr. Saffel. Can you go back to the liabilities page? So my question is, we have our liabilities and our capital asset, our assets and our liabilities match up. No problem there. Okay, page 3. So to me, or my understanding is that liabilities are equivalent to expenditures, or alternatively, I think maybe liabilities are allocations of funds that are going to be expended, and the total expenditures are the ones that that represent the liabilities that have been spent to date.
The best way to think about it, when you're comparing balance sheet to income statement, which is basically what the difference is here, when you're looking at the income statement, this is basically operations. The revenue is the money that we're bringing in, expenses, money that's going out. And that's like really our main focus because that's really what we want to see. But when we look at the overall performance and what's really going on, that's when we look at our balance sheet, because that shows us basically the assets. This is what we have at hand to work with, is our total assets. Our total liabilities are basically what's going out. So when we look at liabilities, that $56,000, that makes up actually expenses that are upcoming. So they're not expenses that have been paid yet, but they're soon to be. We know that we owe this money, and so that's what the liabilities are. The revenue collected in advance, we've talked about that in the past. That's revenue that we've received, but technically we can't claim it until we've expended it for that actual program. So what we see is the fund balance is basically the way that the income statement comes into the balance sheet. So the fund balance represents that difference between revenues and expenditures. That difference shows up as fund balance in the balance sheet.
Okay, but then when you go to page 3, it shows that the net change is $618,112, and that will not change based on page 2?
No, the net change refers to our net change in fund balance. So for the period, this is just, the income statement looks at the year, the year, whereas the balance sheet looks at the life of the entity. So when we look at change in fund balance, that $618,000 is the difference between revenue and expenditures. So the fund balance is changing by, we have more revenue than expense. So the fund balance is increasing by $618,000. When you look at the unassigned fund balance, $1,444,000, $618 of it comes from the income statement. The remaining is the previous balance from the previous year.
So at the end of the fiscal year, which would be June 30, 2022, would that $618,000 plus still be on that line?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if the 618 is what we end up with at the end of the year.
And it should be,
Well,
because it's all projected already.
right. Well, again, it's all dependent on as we go through, if expenditures should increase for some reason, or if revenues should decrease, that number would change. I don't expect it to change much at all, but it's possible that it won't be that exact number.
And if there are changes, Aaron, then to me, CPAs are magicians, because for me, it's just almost like a mystery when I read these, and that's why I ask all these questions. It's a mystery to me, you know. I mean, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not, Nikola Tesla or anything like that. So I ask a lot of these questions because we are ultimately responsible as a board for the fiscal health of the Animal Service Center. And I just want to make sure that and I think also it's good for the public to understand that, money has already been allocated for so many things, as these sheets show, for everything, yeah. Mm-hmm. And $618,000 isn't a lot of money between now and the end of the year. I mean, the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30. Right. So thank you so much for explaining it to me, and thank you for all your work. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board? All right, hearing none, thank you very much for the finance report. And also, just so the public knows, the City of Las Cruces has a number of administrative functions in relationship as defined by the Joint Powers Agreement with the Animal Services Center. One of those is the accounting is housed within the City of Las Cruces, just to clarify, even though we do have a joint relationship with the county, hence the finance report from our city staff, so thank you. All right, next up is the executive committee meeting, and we did have an executive committee meeting that was attended by Director Thacker and I, and we worked primarily on the agenda that you see here, some updates on the construction and what's been happening in the context of the shelter, and that's about it. But we didn't have the full executive committee there, so that was our primary focus, was setting up the agenda for today. So that's my report from there. And the facilities report, I think there's some substantial updates related to the facilities. So, Councilor Gunn.
Yes. Seems like eons ago that we met, right, Clint? But we do meet. We're pretty regular at it, too. We've met via Zoom. And lots going on with facilities, with our new facility as well. Still having some issues with different things. And I'm like feverishly trying to find my notes, Clint, and which is no surprise, right? So if you can help me, with that, I think There continues to be some issues related to the building that Clint and our facility staff through the city are working through. One of the things that I've asked Clint to do is to have a more consistent conversation with Assistant City Manager Eric Enriquez related to that. I hope that happened, as we meet so early in the month, that so much changes at this point in time. So, Clint, could you give us some updates related to that?
Well, we did make arrangements for the, I guess, Tom, what's your title? Program? What's your title? Our project manager over the new center that's being built. Made arrangements for him to come and do a presentation today to update us on some of the challenges that's gone forth with the new center being built and completed. So the completion date has gone back and forth a little bit, so we'll get a final date on that. As far as meeting with Assistant City Manager, I did not sit down directly with him, but we were both in meetings where we discussed the Go Bond initiatives, and we're both familiar with those challenges, especially the ones that Tom's going to be talking to. More specifically for the existing center, we talked about our door frames and doors are rusting out in the bottom because of all the water that's being sprayed around and used. And these are original doors from when the projects were completed. I believe some of them are from 1985 and then others in the 90s when an addition to the center was done. So we just got a quote back for those to be replaced. We are reusing the stainless steel, I call them a kick plate, but the plate that's over the door. Mm-hmm. We're reusing some of those because they're perfectly okay. They just screw into the metal door. We are replacing 2 of the door cases or the door frames. And it's going to be tricky because most of them are filled with cement. So it's going to be loud and some jackhammering down on those areas. In our reclaim kennel, which is the big green tent area, we are getting some cement poured. So that's so we can purchase more kennels, or kennels that are better utilize the space than what they are now. And so then they'll technically kind of be indoor-outdoor kennels. Guillotine doors will be able to be open and the dog can go from front and back, all on cement, so that'll be great. We're also looking at getting pouring a cement slab or footings for one of the transportainer containers, and that will be housed by our facilities specialist. And so he can have a place he can call home and put all his tools and things and be able to, because he's going to be busy with 2 centers here in the next year or so. So without that, Gandra, is it okay if I turn it over to Tom?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
That one yours?
I just have to say how quick this thing has gone up. I went up there just a couple of days ago, and I was, oh my gosh, it's awesome. So thank you for all your work. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Gallagher. I'm a project manager with Public Works, and this is my project, and I'm here to give a facility update. Let's see.
Tom, and if you like, you can move the microphone closer to you. If you need to raise the whole entire speaking podium, if you will, you can do that. It's to your right, a button apparently. Mm-hmm. On the right-hand side, I think on the podium itself. Mm-hmm. Clint.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah,
great.
whatever. Isn't it cool?
Yeah. Surprised nobody has used this yet. Okay.
Today, no. They usually do during council meeting, right? Because everybody's height is different. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me pull out my notes here. Just wanted to look at the major milestones here. Grading was a huge portion of the project. Obviously, there was a lot of ground and dirt to move for the project, and that came in. That was the first thing to be handled, and then handling some underground utilities. There's some electrical and plumbing that needed to be brought in, and then we worked through the site concrete, pouring the base of the foundations of the buildings and the kennels. As you can see here, they started exterior framing, and structural steel has been put into place. The CMU walls, the brick, the concrete brick looking, are about 99% complete at the kennels. And you can see here they started roofing within the past 2 weeks, and they're really coming along well there, and they've started sheathing and fireproofing. That is the yellow boards that you can see there, and the roof deck. And they've begun interior framing with studs from throughout the interior of the building, along with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough-ins for conduit raceways and whatnot. Site challenges, as you can see here in the image, El Paso Electric had these power lines that were running directly over where the new building is now being built. And that was quite a coordination that we had with El Paso Electric, and Comcast had their lines on here, as well as Verizon and CenturyLink. So that was quite an undertaking, and a big collaboration, coordination with El Paso Electric. So these lines were relocated to the south of the new property. Where's my image there? Well, we got one here. One of the challenges we had was in December on the 11th, there was 40-mile-per-hour winds, which actually damaged the newly installed exterior framing studs. We went out, investigated, and were able to identify all of the studs and marked what needed to be replaced. And I think it was probably around 30-40% of the newly installed studs that needed to be removed and replaced with new. Ongoing challenges are also, we're seeing procurement issues. We're hearing from the contractor. They're able to buy the materials that they're needing, but it's equipment and raw materials are taking longer to show up. We've also seen drastic changes in pricing in current construction materials, especially roofing. And I'd say that's affected our ability to value engineer some of these upcoming changes that are coming. But for the most part, we're not seeing too much affecting us negatively with pricing, and this is like an industry-wide issue that we're seeing still impacts from COVID-19 and just the production of material. And recently, I know the hardware, door hardware is most likely to be delayed. We had an issue with the door hardware access control at the fire station as well, which has kind of pushed back our opening date on the fire station 3. So that's why we're thinking we might see some of the same issues here. Right now, we're showing 49% complete. That was as of March 1st. And technically, our contractor is behind schedule. And though we haven't changed the contract end date, we're still showing September 30th. We might be looking at possible October, November for actually turning the building over at this point. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. I would entertain any questions from the board, but I do just want to clarify, I recently learned what value engineering means. It means crushing the dreams of everyone for what they hoped they would get and like getting what you can actually afford. I've been value engineering my life ever since, so thanks for keeping up with the value engineering.
It's basically, crushing dreams and trying to save money.
Yeah. So I'm value engineering my summer break right now. So, all right, Councilor Flores and then Councilor Gandra, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much, Mr. Gallagher. So I think I'm concerned about our GO bond obligation, the obligation, well, it's general obligation bond, but I mean to say that we also have a completion date that has to be met under the GO bond. I mean, that's what I meant by we have that obligation. We have the GO bond, we have all the way around. So, and I am concerned, and I think that everyone knows that everything has gone up. I mean, the price, and lately it's, of course, gasoline we're very aware of for a different reason, but we still have, like the price of bread is amazing and meat and all that sort of stuff. It's just amazing how everything has soared. But I know that in our procurement code, we do, in contracts, there's always in all the contracts, there's a certain amount of increase, you can go back. So you're probably, that's too much in the weeds for you, and well, for me too. But I mean, just given that there is that allowance built into the procurement code and in contracts with our contractors, has that been working? Do you know? Or do you foresee delays that will go beyond December?
Are you referring to like liquidated damages if they go beyond the contract?
Well, liquidated damages and also just the price of goods. I know that the contracts do allow, I think, either a 10%, or the ACM isn't here, he might know, but it's either 10% or 20% for adjustments given unforeseen conditions that arise after the contract has been entered into and agreed upon. So are you privy to any of that, or does it come to you? It probably does come, you have to know, right? I mean, or should know.
We haven't seen too much because, we released the contractor to order or start procuring materials at the start of the job. So they start writing their contracts at the beginning and ordering their material. So their prices are pretty much locked in. If there's any changes that come up, any if there's any issues with the roofing or getting materials, then we do have, I believe it's a 10% in the procurement code. But we haven't really seen any increases for changes yet. For
Insofar
changeovers.
as prices, but you are seeing a problem in receiving those goods because
Right.
of the availability.
Yes.
A scarcity or availability insofar as too expensive for the contractor or the
I believe
materials.
it's just a lack of materials for shipping. Everybody is out there trying to acquire materials, and it's taking longer for them manufacturers to produce the materials.
So,
for
Mr. Gallagher, do you think that we will be on schedule and will be able to have it finalized by the end of the year?
As far as I can tell, our contractor is still aiming for that September 30th date. But it's possible that we will not hit that date. And I'm seeing it on other projects as well, and like the Fire Station 3 was supposed to be complete in January, and now we're at March, and it's finally getting wrapped up, and we're getting the remaining materials that we needed there to wrap it up. So I'm not imagining it's going to take any longer than a couple months. So that's why I'm saying maybe we might be looking at a November date.
That's
for
good
the
news,
turnover.
given the context and the conditions that we face today. Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Kandra.
Thank you, Chair Grant. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher, for your presentation and all your work again. You made mention issues with procurement, but you weren't very specific. So could you be specific? And no criticism. I just want to be sure that if there is, from the administrative standpoint, that I'm aware, so that I could speak to City Manager Peely about that and make sure that we're doing what we can to free that up and make sure that it's timely.
So yeah, procurement in the sense of what the contractor is actually trying to acquire and bring to the job for installation.
Okay.
So yeah, raw materials like the steel, for instance, and the roofing material and the sheathing material. Those are some of the biggest issues that the industry.
But not
is seeing.
internally to the city and its processes?
No.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just clarifying. Thank you so much. So you were specific. I was looking, when I heard that, I was like, oh no, is it internal to our, our processes? So
No.
thank you.
Yeah, speaking towards the contractor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kandra. Any other comments from the board? All right, thank you so much.
Okay,
I really
thank you very
appreciate your
much.
sharing and keeping us up to speed, so thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our action item, Resolution 2022-04 to accept the $30,000 Petsmart Charities Major Initiative Shelter Impact Relief Grant. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good
Please
morning.
state your name for the record.
Yes, good morning, Chair Curran, board members. Elaine Stakara-Simon. I'm grant writer for the ASCMV. And this morning I'm here to tell you a little bit about the Petsmart Charities Major Initiative Shelter Impact Relief Grant that we've received. Petsmart Charities' purpose behind this grant was to help get animals out of the ASCMV or whatever organization they were granting with a positive income, and that was defined fairly broadly under the grant. This invitation we received was actually outside of their normal grant cycle. In fact, the ASCMV was one of only, I believe it was 24 organizations that were invited to apply, which is great. Right? You think, but it's not because they like us that much. It's because of our high intake. All of the 24 invitees had been identified by Petsmart Charities as having exceptionally high intake. So that's why we were contacted and invited to apply. So for our application, we sat down and tried to strategize ways that we felt that this would accomplish, obviously, the Petsmart Charities' purpose, to get animals out with a positive income. And we looked at two specific areas. The first one was a way to augment our commitment to the community and community members who are animal owners, and the other one was to augment our commitment to rescue and transfer partners, whether they are local or whether they are out of state. So with regard to the community members, and this was, we sort of divided our application more or less half and half. Working with the community members, about 50% of this funding is going toward RTOs, which you may know is return to owners. We had looked at a period of about 8 months in 2021, and during that 8-month period, we had RTO'd 695 animals. When we return an animal to its owner, we ask, would you, if it's not altered, would you like to get it sterilized? You know, this is the price. And most often, the answer is no. Some of these animals are, of course, already altered, but most often the answer is no. In fact, during that same, out of those 695 animals, we sterilized only 151. Most often, the reason that people decline is they've paid the impoundment fee and the boarding fee, et cetera, whatever, the vaccination fee, and they may simply not have the funds available to move forward and do this. So this set of funding now gives our front office staff the opportunity to sort of work with the people who really want to get their animals sterilized, and there are these people, and offer them some assistance. So that's half of what this funding will be used for. The other half is using the funds to be able to pursue new rescue partners and also incentivize the current ones we already have by sending them our animals that are adoption ready, meaning that they are sterilized, they are already altered. For example, if we hear from a rescue partner that, you know what, we could take 10 animals from you, but if you sent them all already sterilized, we could take 20. Okay, we'll take care of that for you. So that's what that funding pays for, is to try to incentivize rescues to take more of our animals and to attract new rescue partners as well. So we have until the end of November to meet our goal, which is 353 total animals impacted. So far, with the RTO program, we have sterilized 39 animals. Our goal is 174 by the end of November. For the rescue transfer partners, that number is 27. We have 179 to reach by the end of November. And that is my report, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the members of the board? Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. So this is a grant that we've applied for and waiting for results?
No, we have received.
Oh, you have received?
Yes.
And there were 24 invitees, and where?
I think the number was 24.
Okay.
23 or 24.
We were the sole recipient?
I expect not.
Oh, okay.
I expect that if they made an invitation outside of their grant cycle, I don't know this, this is just my opinion, I would expect that if they invited someone to apply, that the invitees received funding.
Okay. And what geographic area did the invitees, what geographic area were they from?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Because Petsmart, I think, is national or international business, right?
It is Petsmart Charities. I do not know if they are national or international, across the United States, of course.
Right, right. Okay. And, okay, so it was received, and so this is, so why is it an action item?
We need to accept it.
Oh, we have to, mais oui, as the French would say.
I would entertain a motion,
yes.
Barring any questions.
So, no, forget the questions. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to accept this grant.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Flores.
Second, Gandara.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Gandara. I would, please.
Certainly. Board
Thank you,
Member
Becky.
Ward?
Yes.
Board Member Flores?
Yes.
Board Member Ellens?
Yes.
I need you on the microphone, Mr. Ellens, please.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Finally.
Board Member Gandara?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Chair Karan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're on to the section of public input, and I thank you for bearing with us, those of you who are here and who showed up this morning. I know there are a lot of you outside. And so typically public input is, I'll do it in the fashion of the mayor at city council meetings, starting to my left, going row by row. Typically folks have 3 minutes to sort of talk, and please, when you come up, state your name, and if you have any organizational affiliation that you want to share, please share that before you start in the public input. So I'll start here to my left, the first row. Anyone, no pressure. It's not like you have to speak. Everyone, congratulations, you're out. No, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Harriet Danhouse, and I'm a volunteer with the animal shelter and a foster. So I would just like to thank you for allowing us to come up here and speak. One of the points that was raised by Ms. Ward was, some of the people don't have internet access, and so if we're creating these appointments and having people pick their dog that they want to visit by going on the internet to the website to look at the dogs, then not everybody has access to that, or not everybody has a smartphone. So that was, one concern of ours. The big concern is that we only have the small dog area open right now, and that's 18 kennels. There's usually 2 dogs per kennel, so that's a very limited number of dogs being seen. As a volunteer, I go into most kennels and can go in and walk a dog. So I have access to those areas. So I'm just wondering why the public can't have access to those areas. And I understand there's construction and there's not easily navigated paths for those back kennels out there where the large dogs are housed. In Mr. Thacker's presentation or board meeting last month, he didn't identify there is an area called the R area on the shelter map, and that's an outside kennel that houses 50 dogs. It used to be called the reclaimed area, but it's not for reclaimed animals. It's actually where a lot of the long-term large dogs are housed, and that is accessible going outside, so we could easily create a path down to that area. Right now, it has tarps on the outside that protect those 50-plus dogs from the elements, and we could easily just roll those up. It's not inside the facility, so noise wouldn't be necessarily an issue. So we were hoping that we could get that added to the public so they could view that area as well during the walkthroughs. Also, I had the medical director call me on the phone to go over some of my points that I'm making and suggestions that I'm making, and one of her things was we don't have walkthroughs other times of the week because of the parking lot. There's not a lot of parking there. But if we expanded the times that we do have walkthroughs and have them every day for a certain amount of time, then that would possibly limit the amount of traffic in the parking lot at one given time, because right now it's only 3 days a week, 4 hours at a time. That's 12 hours out of 61 hours that the shelter is open to the public. I know they do other things there. I've been there. It's really busy. Hiring more staff would be wonderful. I know that's not a fast process either, but I would, encourage them to specify to volunteers, what is needed at these walkthroughs, and say, hey, we could open up some of these other areas if we had volunteers signing up, but I know we can't rely on them necessarily, as Mr. Thacker pointed out. Do you want to say anything, or okay? Okay, okay. So we are just wanting to work and come up with solutions. Somebody pointed out about the walkthroughs and people just kind of using that for a fun activity to do, and that is true. Like, I understand that. However, I also know that sometimes people walk through the shelter, they might not see the one that they want at that point in time. That's why they don't end up finalizing an adoption after that. Also, you know, as a friend of mine did, she wanted to really think about it. So she went, she viewed an animal, but she had to make an appointment, so she only got to see one dog. And, you know, it was during a specific time. So she saw the one dog, and it didn't end up in a finalized adoption because they're still thinking about it. They're thinking about when would be a good time. You know, that's very responsible for somebody to just think about it thoroughly. So just because it doesn't end in finalized adoption, it could be that it's a thoughtful process, and that's why, you know, possibly those percentages aren't as high. It might not be just because people are using it as a fun activity to do. So, yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for presenting clear solutions, and your ongoing volunteer commitment and commitment to the animals in our community is really, really critical, and we appreciate you being here, and you both being here, so, and you all being here. So thank you so much. Okay, I will keep moving through. Second row empty, third row. Any takers on public comment? Fifth row, I think, is the next one where there are folks. Sixth row. While you guys are deciding, I will invite Mr. Bryce down to talk, and then you guys can figure out so that you don't feel stressed picking who's gonna. Yeah, there's no limit. You can talk. No pressure. Any subject.
Frank Bryce, Humane Society, Southern New Mexico. You kind of opened that up to a little bit longer than we might need, but I'm going to ramble just a little bit. I want to thank these people for coming. I'd like to see more public input, working together, and I've made 4 little notes here. The first one is on spaying and neutering for cats. We need to get that back online. I think it's very difficult right now. I haven't heard anything update on it to get a cat in there and get it spayed for TNR. I'd like to see that back online, a better discussion, get them in there more easily. Let me see where number 2 is there. Referral of stray dogs. We get a lot of people that come to us when they take a dog or a cat to the shelter. They say, well, contact these other folks. If they can't help you, we can. That's not a good policy. I'm really unhappy about that. If the shelter could somewhere develop a process, take the animal in and evaluate it. It may not even be a fit to go back out into the public. We've had enough of those kind of accidents. Don't let that happen. But find out what needs to be done, and if they can do it within reason, then the animal adoption agencies like ours can take the animal and get it adopted at a lower cost. We'd assume the maintenance of the animal, but the spay and neuter, that sort of stuff would be taken care of by the shelter. It's a little different approach, but by the time you send that animal out to all of us, all around the circle, and it goes back to the shelter, you just wasted time, and we don't have the money that the shelter has or the expertise to get it in, and even getting it into a veterinary service is not easy, and it is not easy at all. So that's that one. That may be being addressed with this grant. I'm not sure exactly. Some of this information is all new. Let me find number 3 here. I would like to suggest that some consideration be formed from your organization to form a special public, what do I call it here, a panel to talk about these issues. We had a task force for the ordinances, but we don't have a task force or a official panel to talk about what's going on at the shelter. What can we do? How can we work better together? What can we address that's not been addressed? Lots of things are going on out there, and good things are going on, but some of it is pretty difficult to work around. And my last one here is I'd like to get a comment on the static of the 5 dogs. I believe it's 5 dogs that I use the word Terrence is the owner. He's in the hospital. They have the dogs. They got them the day before yesterday, I think. I got the notice of it. I was told that the dogs are going to be spay-neutered and taken back to this individual, but they have to be out of the shelter by between 5 and 5:30 tomorrow evening, and they're all big dogs. And I'm fostering 16 dogs and 5 cats at my place now. I have the facilities, but I don't have room for 5 big dogs, and I'm trying to find something to help them. I would like to know what's going to happen, and maybe Mr. Thacker can answer this. What's going to happen to those dogs after 5:30 tomorrow evening? Are they going to be spayed and neutered and then something else not go in their favor? That's my last issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't know whether I said it loud enough. I want to thank these people for being here today. It's good to see public comment.
Thank you. I'm going to continue on with public comment, and then I'm not sure if we do have a specific answer. In that case, I suspect perhaps not, because it's pretty specific. Other public comment from the last of the folks on the left? Folks on my right? No? Bernice? No? Okay. All right, I don't know if Mr. Thacker has any follow-ups, or if we should shift on to the next agenda item, which is chair and board comments.
Madam Chair, Clint Thacker, Executive Director. 2 quick comments. One to Frank Bryce's. Like I said, I've been on vacation. I'm not aware of any of those circumstances, but I could sure find out. And then my other one is with the R kennel, or we call it's under R or reclaim. It's just the name that we gave it under the green tent area. It's currently, like I said, cement is being prepped to be poured on the outside areas. So right now, it's not a place for volunteers to be or for staff to be. But again, that is, once we get that parking lot area, that's easily accessible that they can walk into. So it's not a matter, it's more a matter of just the construction areas and getting people to these places back and forth safely is what we're going for.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councilor Flores, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Clint, Mr. Thacker. So the woman who spoke left, but she indicated that there's an area where there's a tarp and it can be lifted and people can go around. You know, I'm looking at it just trying to picture this process, and the whole idea. I mean, for me, when I hear some of the solutions, and it's not to be critical, but I do think, the L word, liability, and and I'm wondering, I think, well, what if that tarp was loose and it fell and it hurt somebody, or what if it fell the other way and hurt the dogs? And I don't know, I can't visualize exactly, but it seems like some of the proposals open the door to liability, and you're addressing safety. And the flip side of safety is if it's not safe, there's liability. And so I think that I think that until everything is finished up there and it becomes safer to access, then we can address some of the requests that are being made at this point. I don't think some of the requests that were made are really viable. As concerned and as caring as the presentation, the presenter was, it just, does it raise red flags in your mind too, Mr. Thacker, or is it just me?
I think the biggest problem is if you want to come out and see it and get a visual of it, you're more than welcome to, and I would love to have you guys there, or the board come and visit. The issue with them lifting tarps, the reason why they're saying that is because if you go inside the kennel, the front of the kennels are covered up with plastic corrugated stuff. So you have to tiptoe over to see the animals. They're not very well made kennels. It was quickly put together with the money that we got from a grant when we tore down the house that was there, the trailer that was in really bad shape. So, but with them lift up a tarp, it's just one of those silver regular tarps from Home Depot that can be easily lifted up. I don't see a liability there. The problem is that's where I said is the forms and everything are there for concrete pouring. So it's not a safe place for my coworkers nor for volunteers to be at this time. But once the concrete is in, then yeah, people can just walk around the outside of the kennels, and we can roll that up during the day for some hours, or maybe have volunteers there. They can see. Again, that kennel area, we're going to be purchasing new kennels for it. And that's what I'm trying to get through this whole thing is that better results are coming. It's just not as happening as quickly as a lot of folks would like to see. When the new center's built, people are going to be able to go and look at dogs specifically from 8 a.m. until we close at 6 p.m. because we're going to have indoor-outdoor kennels. And cleaning isn't a matter like it is now. Like right now, and our whole existence that I'm aware of, staff has to clean before people can come see, because it's a dangerous area with the wetness and the hoses everywhere. So public viewing isn't open until 12 o'clock anyways, ever since I've been here. So when people say open the shelter, or let's open the center, there's some things there that are a little bit misunderstood. And I've already gone over this before. The center's never been open for everybody to come look anywhere they want. And rightly so. There's some areas that just aren't safe with the animals and fingers in kennels and things. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but overall, the areas are coming along. New kennels in this area where the green tarp's covering. When green tarp, it's one of those huge playground fabric tops is what it is. And again, I urge you to come see so you can see it. But so the kennel's being poured, and new kennels are going to be going. Those we're working on right now and ordering those kennels. It's a significant amount of money. It's almost $300,000 for these kennels, because again, value engineering. It's the amount for these kennels just skyrocketed. So we're working on rearranging some money for those. It's all in a process that's happening.
Thank you so much for your answer and your explanation, Mr. Thacker. And thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Thank you, Mr. Thacker, for clarifying and being here and having this conversation with us and with the public. So thank you. And I will note that even as the shelter it may not be open as much as it has historically been. I was here when the euthanasia rate was 30%, 40% at the shelter, and so I recognize the importance of thinking about animals as individuals, trying to get them adopted, trying to get them rescued, and I know that is all of our shared commitment. And I can see there is a graph that shows that dramatic change that's behind this and part of the conversation as well. So I think it's important to note that. Last up, Chair and board comments. I'm going to start with Board Member Ward, even though she's signing something right now. Or I'll start with Board Member Gandra, and we'll work our way down so that you guys can be.
Thank you, Chair Karan. I thought this was a really informative meeting. So happy to see so many young people in the public here really speaking about their concerns related to the center. We'd love to see that more often. I know it can be difficult because it's happening during the week, and I think, or during the day, and I think one of the things is students are on spring break, so what a great educational opportunity to come in to council chambers and see democracy in action. I do want to speak to just sending positive thoughts, prayers, healing light to Penny. I know she's the artist that had a dog bite. I won't say too much more because I know our codes, our animal codes officers are doing the investigation. There's a GoFundMe account if you're interested in funding, providing some funding for her medical care and whatnot. I know there are a lot of individuals, and as I mentioned earlier, that are very concerned about this issue and just the issues in general as it relates to the Animal Services Center codes and stray dogs and vicious dogs and those kinds of things. And I want for folks out there and in the public to know that I'm very committed in making sure that we address this in a very strategic way. We've had a great conversation at council related to this Monday, and I just want the public to know I'm hearing you. I think we need to have a very robust conversation about looking at our ordinances and looking at what sort of resources are necessary, to add a few things like a huge media campaign related to educating the public on responsible pet ownership, maybe, and codes has, LCPD has lobbied or advocated for more FTEs specifically to our animal codes officers, and having the tools and the resources necessary to do the work, and that's always been a deep concern of ours, of mine, and I think of council, frankly. So we will have a work session specifically to our budget. It'll be the first one from our retreat was that in January already, or end of January, early February? So I invite the public to come and really speak to what they think their budget, and it is their or our budget collectively, and where the money should go. And I would love to hear very specifically related to the animal service, array of services, what they think the budget should be related to that. I do know that I received, as others did, I'm assuming, I don't know, I don't talk very much about the kinds of emails we're all receiving, but we received a number of letters specific to the issue brought to our attention related to the center opening up. I really like to see those letters because it appeared like they needed to be either read into public comment or into record here today. I think that's an important issue. I had a number of them, but I also read all of them, and I feel like many, had very good points related to the large breed dogs, sort of how we are advertising these dogs, the kind of pictures that maybe don't represent truly what the animal looks like. And so they asked, do you have a volunteer coordinator? Yes, we have a volunteer coordinator. Do we have volunteers that come and take professional pictures? Yes, we do. I don't know how regularly they do that, but they were talking about the pictures that are listed on our website related to these large breed animals. And so maybe looking at Clint and to the public, if you're an amazing photographer, we always need those kinds of things. And so we want to have very professionally done photography, right? Pictures of our animals. I don't know how possible that is because I know staff is snapping pictures and putting them on as quickly as we can or they can, and maybe we need to re-examine that and see how we can do better photography and videos to really depict the animal in its element. And so I know to answer the public comment related to the internet, not having internet access, I'm inviting you, the library has computers for the general public, for you to utilize and maybe that's not the answer for everybody because of transportation and various things, but I think I'm willing to entertain some of the ideas that were put forth in the letters, and I would advocate that my colleagues on the board look at those very specifically. And then I'm thinking that maybe we need to do some events very specific to large breed, be it bringing the large breed dogs to the farmers market, to Petsmart, but also maybe very specific events that highlight our large breed dogs. I know that every now and again the center does do these sorts of cute little monthly adoption events, and they focus on large breed. Maybe we need to do a little more with that. And so I do, again, I'm very interested. I think we need to utilize our task force that already, which is through the city, and have these conversations more robustly, more regularly. I know it was put together quickly to look at the rewrite of the ordinances, but I think it's something that we need to funnel through that task force, and that would be my recommendation moving forward, Chair Curran. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Board Member Gandra. Board Member Ellens?
Well, you just stole most of my thunder, so I'll be brief. The thing that, of all the letters and emails and phone calls that I've received, one in particular corresponded with the impression I had when I looked at the pictures of the dogs, which is that doesn't really reveal the personality of the dog. How the dog reacts when you walk by the kennel. Does it stick its paw out? Does it look happy to see you? Stuff like that, because that was the impression I came away with when I first reviewed the pictures. And I look at them every few weeks to see who's still around or who's new. And I think the idea of maybe holding a focused event on large breeds would be something that we ought to look into. And I'll leave you to the implementation of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Ellens. Board Member Flores, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that all of us, our community is truly saddened by the incident that occurred last week. I know that the city, every Monday, we announce our Pets of the Week. And I have to say, I think that the pictures are really cute. I mean, you wish you could just reach out and take one of them home, or take them all home. And I know that Clint, Mr. Thacker, I think we had a discussion about how we're promoting our pets, our dogs especially, and because a lot of them are mixed, it's hard to tell exactly. Especially, I'm referring to the large breeds that people are concerned about, and I think we've stayed away from saying pit bull mix, and we've stayed away from only because we really don't know. You'd have to do a genetic DNA test to see exactly what breed the animal is. And so I know, because there was one concern about how large dogs are, they're characterized, and the minute you say pit bull, you automatically think, oh, vicious animal. And that's not entirely true anyway. One of my sons has a pit bull mix. I can say that because little Lola is not up for adoption or anything. But she's the sweetest animal one of the sweetest animals I've ever known. So I just want to say that the city is very conscientious about that and is definitely has deliberately or conscientiously stayed away from putting a breed name or anything that might be terrifying to people. As far as taking steps for safety, it's really a community, it's a moral issue. It's an ethical issue that falls on the entire community. And to think that an ordinance is going to take care of it, it's not. And because when you have an ordinance, you have enforcement. And in order to have enforcement, you really have to have Johnny on the spot. And when anything occurs. And so and that's why I think I just fall back on community education, and it falls on everybody's shoulders. It's not just incumbent upon the city or the county or the Animal Service Center or one entity. It falls upon every one of us in the city, and we have to move on accordingly. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Flores. Board Member Ward?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. In that vein, thank you all for your comments. Thanks to the folks who came out today. Thanks to the city and county staff for your thoughtful presentations and continuing to commit to work on this. I do just want to say a few quick updates on some things that are ongoing. I think we are working on thinking about our TNR ordinance, and I think that we continue to think about that, and we'll keep working on it to make sure that we are addressing community cats in the way that we intended when the ordinance passed last year. And so I do think that as far as things that are going on behind the scenes, that combined with budget-related conversations, I really appreciate the advance work that Clint and his team have done in that vein. We are thinking about how to address some of these systemic issues, I think, that we're really hoping to make a big difference in. And so I appreciate all of you for being here. Those of the folks that left, it was really, it's really heartwarming to see people who love animals as much as we all do. So hearing nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Flores.
Second, Gandara.
Thank you, Beck. We could just vote with your feet, as they say, I think.
Yeah, you can just call it adjourned.
The meeting is adjourned.